casino, out of the 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 casino. Flip it for the edge, flip it for the world, flip it for the edge, flip it for the world, flip it for the edge, flip it for the world, flip it for the edge, flip it for the world. Child just got it down downstairs. Seven times on the main frame of the chair. Telltale's going downstairs. 7 times on the main room up there. Casinos on you downstairs. Out of the casino, 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 out of the casino. Flip it for the edge, flip it for the world, flip it for the edge, flip it for the world, flip it for the edge.
Flip it for the edge. What's up, y'all? Happy early full moon. And it's not exactly full moon just yet. It's about 12 hours away. But yeah, so what's going on here is I've been trying to stream for a couple of nights, but the weather has not been great. And then I got really tired, so I kind of rested for a couple of nights. I did get a couple of shots for myself, but then the situation is such that this eclipse tonight, this last eclipse for 3 years, is not going to happen till like 4:30 a.m. Eastern time, and it's all the way in the west for me, so it's basically a no-go, which kind of is what I know I said I would be able to stream it, but it's not going to happen. So I want to get on tonight, and also in case there's a storm soon, and try and celebrate the full moon with y'all for a little bit. It's pretty close. It's like 99.3% right now. You can see the Terminator just creeping at the very end on the left. Shoutouts to Plain Truth, Genghis Khan, Charles Thomason. Welcome, y'all, and everybody else joining. So yeah, I got the 8-inch pointed east right now, with pretty much like almost a full moon coming up. So we'll ride together for a little bit. Talk a little bit about plasma, consciousness, and the state of things. And then, yeah, I think I might take a little break after that for a bit, because I've been working on consolidation of all the old videos from the channel. And I don't know if you've been following when I mentioned it here and there, that there were like a few, like 100 videos in the beginning from like 2015, 2016 that it's very hard to archive them, because when you try and download the old videos, you just get errors constantly, so it's like a game of just playing around, seeing which ones download. I'm up to about 600 live streams archived, and I think there are about 80 or so left to go. So it'll be nice to have all of those on like a double backed up hard drive. And then as I'm doing that, I'm also going back and watching the old videos, the old streams from 2016, 2017. Really cool. And also a bit of a mess at certain times. And then the other thing is, even though I sort of got the footage down, there were periods where I just did music shows and I didn't talk at all. And I was remembering like what was going on back then, where I just really didn't have much to say about things. So yeah, last, I don't know, I want to say 300 or so shows, 300, 400 are really kind of the standard for me. Like it's, you know, there's nothing I really have changed since I got this setup going. But anyway, it feels good to have that, just in case, you know, like they're changing YouTube, and at some point there'll be enough bandwidth and enough ability to just archive like 500 videos and give people access to that. Lots and lots of good times. It's actually cool because what I'm also doing is I'm putting a spreadsheet side by side with the video folder, logging the title and making some notes about each of them, kind of like good Saturn, decent live, live jams. I also realized like how many live jams I used to do and for how long, but again, a lot of them were covers as well. And so Yeah, hairy situation trying to do covers on YouTube. I see Frederick Fogg in the chat. What's going on? Happy Monday, Moon Day from North Carolina. Shout outs North Carolina. Yeah, it's been kind of gorgeous weather, I have to say. I mean, the issue with the moon lately, the last few nights, so not only have there been just not clouds, but like this atmospheric aberration when I set up, you know, where you can't really see the clear moon because it's just been very high up on the ecliptic. So, but the moon in Jupiter for 2 nights in a row has been really, really awesome if you've seen it in real life. Yo, what's going on, Fantasy XCU? Says, my favorite live jam of yours is Uber Drivers Are Ghetto. Gosh, I don't know if maybe I remember that. I don't know. So, yeah, so I guess a couple of y'all offered me to edit, I mean, and kind of archive some of these clips together, like, you know, do compilation videos. So if y'all are interested, leave me comments on old videos where you have like a clip that you like or a song that you like or something, or maybe footage that caught your attention, and I will try and, as I go through this process of archiving, I'll start creating some of these cool compilation clips based on audience feedback, family feedback. I see Manos Mool in the chat. What's going on? Listeners going to sleep. Calm day today. Good to hear. Thanks for hanging out with us. Fantasy, I wrote in the chat when you were discussing a bad experience and you started jamming out my line, Uber drivers. Yeah, that was probably a chat room song. So there'll be something like with a chat room song compilation video at some point. We shall see. So yeah. If you're just joining, pretty much a full moon. Tomorrow it should be 100%, but really the 100% kind of real full moon happens at around 5, 6 a.m. in the next, like in 12 hours or so. And so by the time evening rolls around, it's already going to be this, but on the flip side, so already going to be a waning moon by the time, if it's clear tomorrow and I stream. So why not just enjoy it together now? Playing some songs from Call in My Mind. I had Formidable Opponent coming up right here for y'all. Let me know if you have any song requests. So I'm just going to hop in here and there and talk about some videos that I saw recently. So Thunderbolts Project, people seem a little antsy because they're uploading older videos. The last one was Wal Thornhill talking about the Mars Maven missions, and essentially just like reiterating the findings of the Maven mission through Electric Universe filter. However, in the video, he does talk about something interesting, which borders on what I'd love Thunderbolts Project to talk about more, which is planetary formation in an electric universe, and pretty much engage this idea of stellar metamorphosis via Jeffrey Walensky, Daniel Archer, and Baz Taylor, I believe. So these cats really talking about stellar metamorphosis in the comments on Sky Scholar, and when you watch Wal Thornhill talk about the formation of Saturn or Jupiter, you wonder why we can't have more of a broad debate about like how these planets are formed and why the complex Earth can arise from star formation rather than clumping of matter in an accretion disk. So what I noticed in the video, because I almost didn't watch it for a second because I realized I'd kind of watched all the old EU conference videos before, but Wal does mention this idea of, you know, the Saturn being having a proto-Saturn, a proto-bubble where Earth and Mars existed within the kind of maybe nuclear shell or the shell of Saturn, and then split apart, and therefore you have this idea of planets being birthed inside larger planets or brown dwarfs. So there's kind of, I was trying to figure out exactly the specifics of what Electric Universe thinks happens when a planet is formed, and it was still vague to me, to be honest. I think it does actually go further than this idea of accretion disk and clumping of matter, but it also doesn't directly say that it takes a lot longer to cook or to bake a planet inside the core of a star. And that's what every exoplanet is, really. Pretty much every object ultimately is a type of star. And then you can derive things from there. And the kind of crossover here is that I was watching a recent video with Brian Greene and a few other people. I think it was just even from last year, and they were talking about, was Max Planck right in terms of consciousness being fundamental? And I haven't done enough research really on Planck or the physicists of the last 100 years, like as much as I'd like to, really. I'm still pretty novice at it, but he was proposing this idea. I mean, the father of, is it Bohr or Planck who proposed this? But I believe it was Planck who proposed the fact that everything is conscious first, and then matter arises from consciousness. But this panel of contemporaries and Brian Greene were pretty, not only convoluted in their explanations, but also very strongly insisted that we have no idea how we can merge quantum mechanics and relativity and special relativity, that also we can't understand consciousness, and that also consciousness is not fundamental, that they disagreed fundamentally with Max Planck. And I thought, like it's so strange how that the interviewer can't press them about this topic and introduce other ideas. And also how strange that we live in this time on YouTube where all these great ideas exist, and somebody like Brian Greene is still blinders on, and he's like, it's just stuff. It's just made of stuff. We're made of stuff, and things are made of stuff, and stuff arises, and there's no real point to it at all. And I'm like, what do you get out of this type of adherence to a model like that? So I don't doubt his sincerity, you know what I mean? I'm sure he's sincere about it, but like the fact that Max Planck actually suggested this over maybe 80 years ago now seems very rational. The idea that consciousness, truly, intelligence is fundamental, and then matter arises from that. I see Charlie Silverman in the chat. What's going on? Welcome. Genghis Khan says, so who has a Libyan glass plasma lightning lamp? I don't have one yet. I think the Libyan glass stuff is really interesting. It's attributed to a lot of other conspiracies, but to me it seems like there's a real logic to it now that we understand how electric discharge works. I see Buddy in the chat. What's going on, Buddy? Great to see you. I was kind of stalking your channel recently, trying to catch up on all the videos. I realized, like, I thought I was subscribed to you and I wasn't, so I resubscribed to you recently. I'm just catching up on your geometric view videos. I see Astralis in the chat. What's going on? Namaste. Is it your birthday in there, I see? Or is that just puppies and cakes and and heart puffs? Well, it's an early full moon here, but I will wish y'all a happy full moon, a blessed, high and mighty full moon. In about 8 to 10 hours, there'll be an eclipse, which unfortunately I won't be able to stream for y'all because it's going to be very, very late and also far, far west for me. It's not really the time. It's more that I don't have the view. It'll basically be completely blocked by a house and a tree. So that sucks, but I'm sure a lot of people will stream the eclipse, so maybe I'll just stay up and watch it or just check it out tomorrow. We have caught lunar eclipses together, so I don't feel too much FOMO. I see Marky Rizzo in the chat. What up, my peeps? And Flat Earth Dude, what's happening? Welcome. But he says, posting a special tonight for the big blood moon. It's going to be about external memory. Hell yeah, I love that. I've been trying to not get demoralized. It's tougher and tougher. No, that's not true. It's easier to stay motivated lately, but still, like, I've been watching some videos, and man, it is tough to see the current state of where we are. Maybe we're just so early in the adoption of these new ideas that it just feels frustrating at this point. Just the longer you stay in this mode, I can't imagine how Rupert Sheldrake feels having talked about this for so long. But, and I mean this in terms of not only connected universe, but memory outside the body, the geometric structure, fundamental structure of reality, the interconnectedness of everything in resonance and oscillation. So yeah, sometimes I watch these videos and I feel like I want to get a litmus test or a pulse on the adoption rate of plasma, cosmology, cosmogony, and electric universe ideas. And it seems like there are a lot more videos and connections than ever before, and it almost is legitimized in a way. And I think at the same time, because in a way a lot of people have adopted electric universe or connected universe ideas, that the kind of, the people, the trolls and the gatekeepers have upped their game, and it's quite aggressive and it's quite incessant on all the videos, where there's this whole kind of talking down to people and character assassination instead of just like sharing ideas and evolving science. It's very, very strange times. But let's see, I see Cyber Sully in the chat. What's going on? It says, when science gets so wrapped up into hyper-materialistic point of view, there seems to be no room for any level of conscious/theology to enter the cosmology of our realm. Well, it's interesting because I think it's facets. Across the board, it's facets. So not all of science, right? There are clearly people who are scientists who must think the same way, who are looking into alternative theories or new ideas, but you get stuck in a system of having to do things a certain way or having to get your knowledge a certain way, and then people form habits. I think it actually kind of comes down to habits, and habits could also be viewed as oscillations and resonances, closed loops or cycles. So what was I talking about? So Marky says, people only take mainstream for the truth, unfortunately. I think, again, it's like it's masses versus a small percentage of people. However, there's this kind of thing where maybe 5% of people can influence 95% of other people. But right now, because people still consume media and social media, the majority of people, I think, are just mostly confused more than anything else. And I think it's they're not only confused, but they're confused even more so because they're the media and movies insist that people are stupid and that people are bad. I talked about this years ago, where I kind of whined about it a bit, But I start to shut up because it's like everybody's got a role to play on Earth, and not everybody can be wise or enlightened. But it does seem that way. It seems like there's this kind of balance between a small group of people knowing and a large group of people not knowing being a natural function of reality. And I think it's actually the hardest possible thing in terms of coming to grips with reality, I would say, is that you have accepting this relationship is truly one of the more difficult things, which is why I think it feels more correct to me to just accept life as is, to understand that perfection is already happening right now. You wouldn't look at a cloud and say, oh, clouds, that's not perfect enough, or you wouldn't look at an ocean and say, not perfect enough. Although, as I'm saying that, I realize people do this all the time. But everyone's like, oh, our oceans are not clean enough, our skies are too dirty. There's always wanting to get the next level of things. I see one last try 9 in the chat. What's happening? Welcome. But I think I got off on a tangent here, but we wrapped up into a hyper-materialistic point of view. I think it's a little bit like, that triggers a lot of ideas in my mind, because I think in my field, because materialism gets a bad rap as well. Not everything, or not all materialism or a materialistic viewpoint or filter is bad. Pretty much anybody using means in the wrong way can basically turn something like materialism into a bad thing. But I think materialism against non-material is really the answer here. It's juggling both and contrast in a simple way. So juggling contrast really implies acceptance of other. And that's really what it is. If you try and fix yourself against other, or other tries to fix you, no go. But if you just allow other to exist and delegate responsibility, then you have the easiest time achieving flow. But not everybody's going to do that, right? That's why flow exists, because flow exists as a contrast to people not being in flow. So yeah. So I'm a little bit bummed that I can't do the lunar eclipse tonight, but I think it's okay. That's I think one of the more challenging things is to just be okay with not being able to film or record an event. But yeah, we can share this almost full moon together for a little bit. And let's put on some tunes here. Throw me some more comments, I'm digging them. hopping back in here just because I got a lot on my mind. So we'll play songs and then talk in between. I see Miguel in the chat. What's happening? Hola. Amigo. ¿Cómo está? Right? Is that how you say it? Está bien. So got the recording. So it cuts the moon a little bit, but I think it's nice to capture a bit of footage here. Pretty sharp. So like I said, I was archiving the entire TakeBackSpace channel, but I'm also going through and archiving my photos and doing some processing. So I'll be sharing a couple of new like process shots of the moon on my Flickr page soon. Is Flickr still a thing? But or I'll just share them on stream. What's happening, Annette? One love. What's going on? So yeah, I just want to, I was mentioning this video that I watched with Brian Greene and a bunch of other contemporary thinkers answering this idea, is consciousness fundamental? And then I also watched this thing with Dean Radin, from not from Mortal Kombat Raiden, and he was talking about this idea of self and other. Like, I guess my point is that what was my point? My point was that they were looking, yeah, that's what they were talking about. They were talking about this idea of not being able to isolate the observer from the experiment, because in a way, the observer, not in a way, but fundamentally, the observer is a quantum effect. So we are made of the same stuff that we're trying to place measurements and rulers upon, and therefore, especially at the quantum level, we influence, or the experimenters influence the experiment. So how is it really even possible? Like, fundamentally, quantum mechanics is flawed, is what they were arguing. And I thought that's an interesting idea, because there's there are several different routes to quantum mechanics. Some people think it's solved everything. Some people think it's a complete waste of time. Others think they have to do more work to build bigger colliders, right? But then there's this whole thing with Sabine Hassenfelder, who's going around kind of saying Big Bang doesn't exist, dark matter, dark energy doesn't exist, and quantum mechanics is bust. So there is that new threaded sentiment that I feel like has been like a few years now. You have Alexander Unziker. You also sort of have Sky Scholar and Electric Universe doing the same sort of thing, where they're like being very stringent about this idea of like no black holes, no dark matter, no dark energy, and the Big Bang didn't exist. Like, absolutely no room for discussion about it. And I mentioned this on a couple of shows ago, where there was a video recently where it's like the Big Bang never made sense, and where I explained a couple of fundamentals, where if we just symmetrized the Big Bang, if we looked at the Big Bang as layers of plasma, and if we looked at the Big Bang as fundamentally being something that is percolated out of consciousness, and there have been multiple Big Bangs, which superstring theory talks about, then you actually do have a way to talk about the Big Bang that is not just something that is overly simplified. I think, to be honest, like the people who are trying to tear down the system in a way are doing a disservice by being like the system in this black and white way. Ellie Wynn, what's happening? Great to see you. Amy G, thank you. Awesome to see you in the chat as always. Hope you're having a lovely night. Charlie Silverman says, it seems pretty obvious by now that we have two parallel systems of science, corporate science and real science. I would add to that there's also conspiracy science, which is the way that I think, I don't want to say ultimate science, but I think science that really is, let's say holistic science. I think really it's holistic science versus interdisciplinary or like specialized science. So people who specialize in certain things, and it's pretty much any field, it's not just like quantum mechanics, it could be in design, it could be in music. People who specialize, you tend to find a lot more people who have specialized rather than people who are generalists. Because being a generalist means that you have to spread your talent or your time thin. But you will find some people who are generalists but also pretty much also masters at things, or at least very good across the board at things. And you tend to find that these are the people who write the songs and produce the movies. You typically, they are I don't want to say leaders in the sense that I think that word is kind of tainted by politics and culture, but leaders like a tree limb, for example. What's the point in the electric system where the tree limb, like the first big limb, branches out? Those thinkers or those activators or those energetic photons tend to kind of guide the system at certain junctures. So I was thinking about this idea about generalization versus specialization in terms of like science, in terms of, and also in terms of how businesses work and delegations work and delegating works. So you see academia, and these people want to hold on to their specialization, and they're a little bit apprehensive of people who have another specialization because they're like, well, I've spent all this work on being really good at this one thing or these two things, and other people are like, I did it for these two things, and therefore, I have to protect my domain. So it's not just being a generalist, but it's being able to be a generalist or be an integrator of ideas. And so I can look at it from two different vantage points, which is one, that's an archetype, and therefore natural process is that most people will have to fulfill a role, but then some people have to define the role. And so I feel like this applies to all the stuff we're talking about. But Dennis Humble, what's going on, says polymaths. Yep, polymaths, or even, you see these kids who are prodigies now. They're good at sports, they're good at music, they're good at language, multilingual, multiracial. They have genes that are probably more mixed and more varied and more incredible than any gene pool that's ever existed. They're immersed in quantum mechanics and fundamental science and music and all sorts of things at the highest possible distilled fractal level of all conscious realms. And therefore, being a generalist is not even that good anymore. You have to be a master generalist. You have to be somebody who can do all sorts of different things at once. And as somebody who can see both sides of it, because I grew up in the 80s and 90s, you didn't really have to do that. There were far fewer people. There were more apples for people, and now just there are a lot of people, and so you really have to be much more varied and much more generalized than just being in your box. And so this is a roundabout way of saying when you see these people talk about consciousness or science, they're coming from one or two vantage points. So it's a way for me to kind of accept the state of science today, because you have to realize that some people are just coming from we do quantum mechanics, and we've always thought that quantum mechanics and special relativity do not jive, and therefore no go here. And that's it, and they're stuck in this rut. And so if you're coming at it from the outside, like, for example, me, I'm coming at it from, I love quantum mechanics, I love standard cosmology, but there's something wrong. Why can't we have coherence? And you realize the coherence is purely just imposed. It's like saying, here, there's divisiveness. We insist there's divisiveness. Let's never fix it. It's a very strange cultural meme or cultural movement of just adherence, decoherence. Anyway, rambles about how people adopt ideas, but that's what I'm thinking of lately. I think it just might be the contrast. Every time I think about, I get to a wall that says, that has a big Y on it, that says, why, the big why, why do children die, or why is Earth going up in flames, or why do people act this way? I have to think that it's part of the contrast of the geometric structure. In order for us to have any type of experience that we're having, there has to be a counterpoint to it. And the counterpoint is in the form of cultural behavior or human behavior or cultural norms or scientific ideology, right? In order for us to sit here with 20 people and talk about absolutely every idea without any judgment. No, that's not true, without any judgment, but just to be able to talk about pretty much any concept without losing temper and while holding our own ideas, without having to destroy our own values, and be able to discuss this. And so for this to occur, then, other channels have to have 500,000 views and be in complete lockstep with just really obtuse science. I really find it so obtuse. I was trying to study and see what the mainstream says, but man, it's just so hard to watch some of these videos sometimes for extended periods because of, yeah, why? Because, what's up, Gerald Frank? What's going on? Dogmatic repeaters, but even the presumptions and the assumptions of all these ideas about, like, wanting to find out what happened a trillionth of a second after the Big Bang. You know, and if the interviewer were a human being, they would ask this quantum theorist or this Big Bang cosmologist, well, what physical or human or cultural ramifications will occur if you figure out what happened a trillionth of a second after the Big Bang, besides just having a great headline? And first of all, the journalist never asks that question. And if the journalist ever did, a quantum mechanics major or quantum mechanics professor or a YouTube channeler would not have anything to say about it. There's no actual correlation between what happened a trillionth of a second after the Big Bang and what we can do in real life, or figuring out where memory is from, or how the eye works, or thinking about the moon, or really like stuff that's right here in front of us. So even the questions in mainstream science and academia are just kind of mind-numbing to me at this point. Again, I'll give you an example. Like even this Michael Levin. I don't know if any of y'all are following Michael Levin, but he does the planaria worms and talks about human biofield, all the stuff that I've mentioned, but he doesn't talk about the fact that that in fact the organism being self-assembling and self-organizing and self-regenerative implies consciousness being fundamental, this really huge concept that people don't tend to talk about. And I think further than that, the consciousness being fundamental, and the fact that since we arise from consciousness, this eliminates all the huge major questions in philosophy, the hard problem of consciousness, because that it doesn't negate physics, it integrates physics, but it gives you a fundamental place to begin with, things like Big Bang, dark matter, dark energy, but also Vedic philosophies and teachings, and also contemporary modern Buddhism and Zen and contrast and field. A lot of people understand field, I believe. All right, I am definitely all over the place tonight. But I had a request for golden earlier. I know it's super cloudy. Like I said, it's been tough weather recently, but I want to capture a bit of the moon and let you all know that I'm not going to be streaming the eclipse later, but I hope y'all see it, catch it. I'll try and peek out the window if I'm awake. Golden coming in. back in here. So that was golden. Good vibes right there with the moon. It's kind of going in and out. I'm not sure. I'm just going to keep the settings here for a moment. I think we'll get some views. I'm just responding to Dennis here just about like weather mods. It's very likely. I mean, first of all, it's not really even a secret, right? I'm like, oh, should I even talk about it? But I've mentioned it before. Trails, even if they're not a conspiracy, it's a very easy technology to induce rain clouds. There's also the whole kind of correlation with the mind and chanting and Native American and tribal chanting, as well as meditation of cloud seeding or cloud busting. So it kind of, I think that the whole idea of it is very broad and and ancient. So I think us doing it, us and every country doing it of their own skies or each other's skies, it seems like the spread on how common it is so drastic, right? It's a little bit like the moon thing. Can we go to the moon easily, or is it a super difficult thing to do, and why was it even possible at one point with any level of money or technology, and now it seems to be like the most difficult thing a company, an aerospace, an aeronautics, or an an aeronautics group can do is get to the moon. It's literally the most impossible thing. But getting to Mars somehow is easier. It's a very strange state of affairs we find ourselves in terms of like what level of technology Earth really has versus is there alien technology? Is there human-based technology that's based on not just quantum mechanics, but really the stuff that Tesla was working on and the stuff that Ken Wheeler has talked about pretty much. There's always this kind of air of secrecy around it, but really it implies anti-gravitic technology and faster. People think faster than the speed of light. I think, they say this thing, faster than light technology, but I feel like that's fancy language. I feel like if you really understand speed of light, then you realize that everything already moves at the speed of light. It's not a special thing to move at the speed of light, and I think it's just a fancy way to cover up certain types of but they're not. I even say that, but I'm even questioning myself because all of Tesla's new stuff, all of SpaceX new stuff is quantized plasma ion engines, and that stuff is pretty much what Sapphire is. It's the same sort of stuff. So I feel like it's not really a secret anymore. All right, now we have some heavy clouds, so let me adjust these for a momentarily. Maybe we can meditate on busting these clouds. Let's try it.
I left home at 17. Couldn't tell you if I was living a dream. What could I do? For a while I played the field. How could I prove the hidden yield without the blues to feel? My heart was cool and left no residue. Catch me if you fall, catch me when you're low. Look goes higher, as friends used to know. Catch you when you fall, catch you when you're low. Wake up in solitary. Wake up, it's imaginary. Man, don't you know your life is worth more than this? Catch me if you fall. Catch me if you're low. The loot goes higher up, as fast as you can go. Oh, catch me if you fall. Catch me when you're low.
All right, a little bit of catch. And the clouds are moving, that's good. So, I don't know, because I got lots to talk about, I figured I'd hop back in here and try and, like, finish up some ideas. I see Nada25, Moon, gotcha, what's going on? Dennis says lyrics in this jam are legit, thank you, kindly. Catch, sticking it out all these years. So yeah, I want to play one of the new songs, Bougie Boogie, coming up after this, but let's talk about a couple of things. Just reading your comments. Red Rum, what's happening? Welcome. Damn, look at that, got real bright. Bright and windy. Damn, it also got clear. All of a sudden. Nice. Not complaining. How's that? Look at that. Sharpie sharp moon. It's pretty wobbly because I decided to move the 8-inch here, and it's indoors, so every time I make a step, it just wobbles. So forgive that, but it looks very crispy otherwise. And it also is quite windy. So let's see. Sensei Camillo says, I heard a rumor that N Tesla, like that. That should be a Nickelodeon or like Adult Swim show, N Tesla. Somebody go make that with AI. Was designing some Little Debbie treats, but now the FBI is planned. I mean, can you imagine a Tesla, or a Nikolai Tesla, Little Debbie? It's kind of a shame. I thought it just made me think of the fact that when you look up Tesla now, you don't get Nikola Tesla, you get a car, you get a company. So the eclipse, I think, actually starts at around 4:30, 4:40-ish, and it's very far west, so if you're just showing up, I kind of am bummed that I can't stream it, but there'll probably be enough streams of it for all of us to enjoy. So yeah, it's very far west for me, like west, northwest, and at like 5 in the morning. So even if I could see it, it would be a tough kind of thing, staying up all that. And then it just finally peaks. I think it'll, plus you get the sun coming up. We'll see if we can even see it at all because of the clouds lately. It's just been crazy right now. Like there are huge shelves of clouds, maybe because of the storms. So anyway, I want to just quickly talk about extended mind because I think it's one of the most important fundamental things that most people don't talk about, is the fact that we live inside the mind and we experience life inside shells of organized plasma that we resonate with. And this is the other that we speak of. This is the outer body experience. And this bubble is oscillating, reverberating, creating new layers, also storing information, storing it, and it itself is matter, right? So it actually resonates, and it likely even has a lattice, so to speak. And so extended mind is just a huge idea that I think about constantly. I live in this world where now I feel like I could say I imagine the bubbles around people, but you start to sense people's fields. And I think that's where we can come in and bring it into reality, because we do have very great senses and there is a field. And that's, I think, where we can start to pick up on the fact that this is not something we have to imagine, but something that we can actually sense. Because I think that's why people are, I think, confused, because they can't really prove certain large ideas or convince themselves without actually having the experience themselves. A lot like when people talk about near-death experiences, they tend to be very skeptical or cynical up to the point until they have a near-death experience, and then they become a believer. And sometimes they're a believer and they have a near-death experience and become atheistic or agnostic. So it's very much a juncture point, almost like an enlightenment point, to have a self-awareness, to understand that you live within the mind that you create, and you create a world with the mind, co-create reality. Miguel says, eclipse tonight. Yep, eclipse at 5 in the morning, so in like 8, 9, 10 hours from now. I'm sure people will be setting up, and it's if you look in the west, you will see. I think Plain Truth earlier said it was the Selenian tomorrow, which is, I guess, having the sun and the moon both visible at the horizon at the same time. So if you have a good shot of a westerly view, that's going to be great. Let me see if there are any other comments up here. So extended mind, that's a huge idea. How does this work? Self, the filamentary axis of self, interacts with field via resonance and oscillation. And not only do we have layers of our memory, but in between the layers we can maybe refer to time as an intervallic negative layer between the plasma layers. And so this is something that I'm working on. I'll be talking about and showing more diagrams at some point in the future. But I've mentioned it before, but I really, for some reason, this time being also intervallic bubbles between magnetic moments is something that I feel like just dawned on me. I don't think I've read it anywhere, and I think that maybe I could just be like, just imagining things, but I also think that it really does fit into this. So about making time, or time slipping away, also time being relative, scalarly, also the fact that time is an interval, and if you have an interval at different orders of magnitude, it would have to function at different orders of magnitude, but also be the same sort of essence, the same way humans and creatures are pretty much the same shape, but we all vary. So I imagine that time layers, negative time layers or chaotic time layers between magnetic moments of memory layers is also an idea that I think I just really haven't heard anywhere. Ellie Wynn says, my plasma is congested. I'm feeling a little better today, but 3 days of plasma congestion. Sinus iridum. Well, I hope you feel better soon. Just there's something in the air for sure. What's in the air? Who knows? Who knows? All right, what song is coming up next? This one's called Bougie Boogie. Throw me some comments on something like consciousness, so extended mind. What do you think about the extended mind? When I say it, do you envision this field? Or is it something where you're like, what the hell is Cap talking about? Is this something that's just like an imaginary thing? Or do you see these layers of plasma around your body where you're storing your day-to-day experience in the cloud, so to speak? Does this make sense to you? I guess I'm just asking that. Feel free to answer while we listen to some tunes. Moon is back somehow, so I'm feeling blessed.
700 lives we live. Innocence, I've known you forever. 7,000 lines are read. Soul inside your bubble time bracelet. levels divided, one heavenly at a time. Would you know the life we had? And still we live our love so bad. It was always electrical. 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 It was always It's like a perception's garden, fractal harmonic diction, slowly giving rise to our carnival. We thought so far, a reservation guest stars. Never mind this old honeymoon, we can make some more. Make yourself some beautiful subtle energies. I told you once we never, you know this forever. It was always electrical. 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 It was always All right.
That bougie boogie. All right. So, let's see what we got here. I want to read some of these comments. So, Cyber Sully, you got to clarify for me. Say, Cyber Sully says, is not the source of our created experience that which is real, and not necessarily that which we manifest. I guess if I understand you correctly, I would respond that it's one and the same, right? It's not the source of our created experience that which is real. Hard to say. I guess the source, if you wanted to other the source, like you could say, the thing is the source, even in the Matrix, ultimately it's kind of like a weird thing because they're having the experience, Neo's having this experience with the architect, but in fact they're both still part of the system. Their manifests as whatever they see each other as are still within the Matrix. So the Matrix itself really could be viewed as the source, the great source, the unified infinite consciousness field, and the resonance, that which we see as duality, arises from unified field. So I feel like that's where, but what happens is what arises is what is created and therefore manifest, and matter manifests it more matter in a way by experiencing it. So simply experiencing it actually manifests and creates reality. And so the experience itself, as it creates reality, creates the echo of the imprint of reality upon reality as we know it. That's how I think it works. I'm starting to see, when you look at it from the outside, I've referenced them all before, but like things like dyslexic artist theory on the physics of time, and then Ken Wheeler's stuff, and then electric universe stuff. If you look at it all from the outside, everybody's really trying to say the same thing, that when you break it all down, we're pretty much one. And then when you ask somebody that, you're like, well, what is one made of? And then you start to see that we have these connections in space, this dark matter, so to speak, or dark wires. And then when these wires coil and entangle, they become luminous wires and they become matter. But really, what is entire source? Entire source is both dark matter and light matter. And therefore, it's both contrast and, I mean, it is the contrast. The yin-yang, really, the idea of it is not that it's this cool symbol, is that it's really, you can't have the whole without the half or the piece. That wasn't as eloquent as I would have liked. But Grace Jones doing Boogie Boogie, that could be very, very cool. I could see her doing that faux show. Let's see. Dennis Humble says, it does make sense to me in terms of the human field. I have some solid sense of what Eileen McCusick refers to as the biofield, which could easily be plasma in an etheric sense. She, I gotta say, is doing the most like actual work of starting to sense human biofields. I know other people, I'm sure, have, like, they're probably shamans and probably people who are naturally gifted at sensing other people's fields. So I feel like this kind of, there's a skill, a level of natural talent, and there's also a skill that can be learned where you can read people's auras or biofields because they are actually tangible structures. Interestingly, if I'm just saying that because this is kind of like, I don't know if Buddy is still around, but you know, like when Dr. Robitaille, when Pierre-Marie Robitaille, Sky Scholar, talks about condensed matter, he doesn't, he's never really talked about the human condition or the human body, but the human body itself is also condensed matter, and it has a lattice structure. And so I'd be interested to hear his take on what humans are, or not just humans, but creatures that are grown along filaments. He also doesn't mention filaments, but what is matter condensing to, or what induces matter to condense? Because the way that it's answered typically in mainstream is that they say it gravitationally collapses, but collapsing is something does. Not to reify it like Ken Wheeler says. So collapsing is a description, and gravitationally is also in a way a description. So, but I think if you think of a wire, an energetic twisting wire collecting matter from its surroundings by attraction repulsion, by a combination of attraction repulsion, then you get a sense of something that you can actually visualize because the matter is attracting to a certain point. That point is not just the wires, but the nodes, these Z-pinches, and that's what we see. So Dr. Robitaille talking about that, I really wish he would kind of address coaxial Birkeland currents or Birkeland filaments, and also the fact that humans are essentially condensed matter with a lattice, and we radiate in terms of the way he talks about black body radiation, or rather Kirchhoff's law in relation to the human condition is sort of what I'd love to hear about. So let's see. So right on, just to quickly wrap up, definitely check out Eileen McCusick, Human Biofield, Rupert Sheldrake, Morphogenic, or Morphic Resonance, Morphogenetic Field, rather. When he says, I finally figured out what he means by this. Morphogenetic field means that the field contains the information that creates the shape within the field. So babies are born based on, you could say, their environment, but I think environment is kind of not as good a word as field. So when an entity comes into the system, it's informed by the field. So that's what morphogenetic is. But morphic resonance is the resonance of these fields. That's how we communicate or sense things. Miguel, take care. Good night, my friend. Sleep well. Catch you on the next one. I see our moon is coming through clouds here. Let me adjust. Yeah, very finicky tonight. So let's see. Charlie Silverman says, I asked my sister to ask her young son if he knows why the days of the week are named after planets and moons. Before she could ask him, he asked her if she knew that the Monday is named after the moon. That's awesome. Sorry, I can barely read here. Just dark mode in the, like, it's good to see things, but it's not great to read things. I mean, great to see video against a dark background. Anyway, it freaked her out. She phoned me this morning to tell me. I think kids, like I said, are growing up in an incredible immersive knowledge bubble right now. They get access to extremely high-level distilled fractal intelligence as soon as they're born. And daily, it's escalating and exponentially growing in fractality, and AI is coming into being. So babies born in 5 years are going to have an exponential amount of information at their fingertips. And it's not just information. People don't talk about the additive nature of skill distilling. So over time, people who get good at things share their knowledge, and the next person to come along gets the entire distilled amount of knowledge from the people who've worked it out. And then they themselves are at that level, and then they can say, oh, well, at this point, me and the other people can figure out the rest of this, and so, or more of it. So you get fractalized, distilled information passed down into an immersive field right now. So it's kind of crazy. Kind of nuts. Cybercelly says, eternal, absolutely still source being the singularity and our experience being a fleeting projection. I think fleeting may be not dramatic, but maybe it's too energetic. I feel like our oscillation is like our heartbeat. Sometimes our heartbeat feels very slow. And so our life bubble doesn't seem like it. Like we do talk about it, right? Time is running away from us, or time is fleeting, or life is slipping through my fingers. But I feel like life, if you look at it from a different vantage point, it's very, very long and very slow. We tend to exist and we tend to survive, actually. And I think it's really the uncommon way of looking at it is that life is quite long. But yes, eternal, absolutely still source. Well, also, again, eternal, absolutely still source, but this idea, even what Tesla was saying, the fact that it's resonance in the ether, the absolutely still source is now resonating. So it no longer is a completely pure still source. Source now becomes, well, I don't know. It's interesting because it's hard to say that we can say, okay, everything is unified consciousness field and this is the ultimate source, and then we would end up doing sort of the same thing that we're doing now, which is trying to fix the universe at a certain point and say, I understand you, which in Zen kind of is really is counterintuitive, because the whole reason we exist at all is to have an experience, and trying to fix life and understand it and to dissect it is not really the goal, which is why we don't end up discovering everything. However, I don't know. We live in a reality that is dipolar, and theoretically you could say that there's a section of people that their aim is to make things as confusing as possible. And then there's a small group of people their aim is to make things as clear as possible. And we exist in contrast. Gosh, it got real cloudy, didn't it? Let me throw on a song here and see if I can't get us going a little bit longer.
Records. slowly up the stairs. See a head of lion sit alone upon his bed. Oh, fractured beast, I know it's been so long. What time is it? Time is it? I know I will cast sight of it, so go on in form. Oh, sand is like the mind and scattered soul. I let it go. Sigh like I'm all reaching out. I left my home for 7 nights, trail along for 7 nights. Let the whole heart sing. We're coming to shop this time. The light does it fire. Say you've been traveling on so long. Like there's a fire. There's a fire. There's a fire. There's a fire. Say you burn. Like there's a fire. There's a fire.
All right. So just put on a pre-recorded clip from a few minutes ago. Little desert fires up in there. Just reading some comments. Ellie Wynn says, "Human life is short, suffering is long." But the nature of living is suffering, no? Because if you don't suffer, you don't move forward to change, and if you don't change, we don't evolve. I guess that's kind of the idea. The real trick here is to love suffering, right? Let's see. Cyber Sully, yeah, like I was saying, I don't disagree that things are fleeting, but fleeting implies speed in a way. But I feel like when you create a memory layer, it moves ever so slightly away from our human body in a very, very thin plasma layer around the human body. So memory is actually quite, it almost is, there's a gradient of memory. So closer to the human body, the physical human body, you have a lot more of the memory. And then our long-term memory exists out in the field, but it extends, it's very diffuse, which is why it's quite difficult for us to remember our births. Our birth literally is the instantiation of that first bubble, and that bubble layer is now as far as it possibly can be from the human eye, the Birkeland current, or the coaxial electrical current that is the human nervous system, the branching. So this branching is reacting to these layers of plasma around the human body, and this is where we store everything. I imagine it to be this way, but I'm always open to learning more. Cyber Sully says, "Seems to me only 2 states exist, rest and motion." So, yeah, one could say that. One could say that. I feel like I don't know if anything is truly at rest, you know? Anything, or since the very fact of experiencing is motion. So I don't know, I think we only know rest as a contrast. So rest basically is field, and motion is the resonance in field. So we experience anti-field, or implosion, or negative entropy, which I think that whole thing with Dan Winter about neg entropy is like really fascinating and probably pretty spot on. Cyber Sully says, "Motion springs from rest, but is not rest, as motion is transitory, where rest in not. The rest is not." But I think it's just like when you create motion, you have, I was seeing this whole video about recoil. But recoil, if you think of the word, right, you're winding back up. So when you emit energy, you have to wind back up, twist back up. So you have torsion in the human condition, human existence. Dennis says, would it be founded to view suffering as the friction between the polarity of this realm, energy, heat, electricity, lack of language here, produced by the interaction of the opposites? Yeah, in essence, that's what's really going on. Like, the pain that we feel constantly is our human body condensing matter, collapsing matter along these filaments into the shapes that we view humans as, let's say. And the fact that when we come into equilibrium, there's a state of electrical charge of our body when we're healthy, and then we vacillate between these being healthy, not being healthy based on electric charge. The Gerald Pollack stuff, Eileen McCusick, Rupert Sheldrake, that sort of human biofield is self and other reacting to everything around us. We also exist within a field of bubbles. It is layered and complicated in some ways. It's easy enough to isolate the fundamental geometry and oscillation and resonance nature of how it works. Annette says, yes, but where Dan Winter is concerned, his connections with Elena Danaan make me question his credibility. Annette, I don't know if you heard me say that before, but I also agree with that 100%. It definitely, like, Elena Danaan's a very interesting character. Like, I don't want to shit talk anyone, right? But I think, like, the information is very convoluted. The whole ufology stuff is very convoluted, and it kind of boggles my mind how accurate Dan Winter is with his assessment of physics and torsion and Planck and golden ratio, cascading fields, implosion theory, neg entropy, omnidirectional anti-gravitic craft, the history of the space. I mean, like, Dan Winter is so right about so many things, I think. It boggles my mind why he, like, believes there's a galactic federation. Like, he really believes there is one. And I don't know, maybe there is, but it's a difficult thing to figure out right now. I don't know, I have so many thoughts about it. I don't want to chuckle and, like, laugh it off the same way people do. Let me check out and see if the moon is back up, and we'll talk about it a bit more. But yeah, I hear you on that. I don't get it. But in the same way, I feel like Thunderbolts Project not addressing the people in the community like Jeffrey Walensky and Stellar Metamorphosis, or re-engaging Sky Scholar, or just bringing on more people. I mean, or even responding to comments, for example, right? Like, they don't respond to people who are true diehards of EU fundamentals and who, like, I don't know. There's something going on with people like doing the work to connect the dots. But yeah. All right, be right back here.
Black iron wants to be red. We shot black waterfalls, so the words cut harder once. Side bombing, mom and dad. Those times ain't coming back. Hard to know just how to feel. And could they ever know peace? Maybe I'll just cut them slack. But they work so hard to relax. Get their bodies to the sea. I feel the end becomes me. We're the end, become the solution. Smiles, not confusion. My heart, I release you to the memory of this place. High, stellar fog, song, an analog.
So yeah, it is full cloud cover. jump back a couple of videos so we can watch something while I talk a little bit about this. So yeah, I mean, I feel like there's so much to say about Dan Winter's work and him as a person, and even Jim Wenninger, I think. No, not Jim Wenninger, that's from Electric View stuff. Who's the other guy? The guy who started Gaia TV. He just had a chat with him. Completely forgot his name. But really fascinating chat. And when I hear Dan Winter talk and he doesn't bring up ufology, I'm like completely on board pretty much. Because I feel like even though he does repeat himself and he says things very quickly and he has this tick where he chuckles a lot, and I don't want to call it like a negative tick. I think it's a good thing to have a big grin and be so excited about the topic that you're talking about. I maybe sound too somber sometimes, but I love that he laughs. But I also think that the stuff that he's talking about is so important and so complicated that, like, I wish he would slow down a little bit and dissect a few more things from a vantage point of like how this relates to other things. It's something that maybe I tend to want to do because that's how I understand things. If somebody can relate things in a simple way, then I tend to understand them, but I'd also like to know the complex idea as well. So give me the broken down relationship idea, but also explain the complex idea so I can figure out how to merge the two things. So Dan Winter tells us about, he tells you the math outright, tells you the implosion theory outright, tells you about pentagon into hexagon. I've never really heard anyone in alternative physics talk about like pent to hex relationship ideas and the mudras. Pretty interesting to hear that. Maybe, I guess, Walter Russell's work touched upon that. But also at any point, ask me things about this. But anyway, so I've watched, I don't know, 50 videos or so from Dan Winter, like tried to really listen and understand. He's a bit like Sky Scholar, where they talk about these extremely high level ideas, but they also infer, like just drop concepts and theories, things that you'd have to go look up separately to really grasp what they're saying on a whole. But I think Dan Winter, this idea that he does really say that we create reality by sending out emissions from the human body. This is the big thing. So Michael Levin, I was talking about him earlier, who is basically dancing around the same topic. He's talking about how you put a bacteria, a slime mold, right in the middle of a petri dish, and they can sense the resonance coming out of this simple slime mold, and it starts to sense the petri dish, and its reaction to that is what we understand as consciousness. It's not more complicated than that. So experiments show that consciousness, this idea of spatial awareness or self-awareness or just awareness, which is the coalescing of matter along a Birkeland current or an electrical filament, or an electrical filament, and a Z-pinch, more so a Z-pinch, but really you could think of our nervous system if you just type in the human nervous system and just look at the way it's structured. And then if we look at, for example, the local supercluster, the mapping of the universe, you'll see that it looks very similar. Basically, the structure of the nervous system is a branching, Lichtenberg structure. And it's really just branching. What's happening is you have a wiggle, and then bifurcation, and then bifurcation, bifurcation. And decisions are being made by the ratio, I think, the energetic transfer of the wiggle. You could talk about it, like I was saying earlier, about like why does a tree grow out huge limbs and then branches and then twigs and then the fruit and then the leaves, right? There's this kind of fractal cascade of orders of magnitude. And if you think of the field is this donut and the hourglass shape, but really this outlines the wires that are connecting everything. And along the wires you have dots or nodes or stars or Z-pinches or plasmoids or a heart or a chakra or a planet or an atom nucleus. And around every dot you have a shell, a field. And self and other, or nucleus and field interacting, is the awareness is what we call consciousness. And we can see it manifest on every scale. We see it every day. I think the huge correlation here, or just like a big correlation that would happen, is saying that we can apply quantum mechanics to the very large. Just no one decides to say that. It's a very simple sentence that if somebody like Brian Greene or somebody like Michio Kaku or somebody like Joe Rogan even said, okay guys, now 1 million people are just going to look at the world and say, we're going to apply quantum mechanics to space, things would change. I mean, I would put money on it. I'd bet crypto on it. What's up, Henry Dorn? I see you. What's going on? Plasma. It's always been. Dennis Humble, take care. Great to see you. You have a good night. Thank you. I feel you. I feel a little bit on the tired side tonight, but I definitely wanted to share this with y'all and make sure I connected and said that I wasn't going to stream the. I think people would have been like, where the hell are you at? Why aren't you streaming this eclipse? So did that. So yeah, Annette, good point about Dan Winter. That's the same thing for me. So Elena Denon, so this is my thing with Elena Denon. So very cool lady, clearly very smart, well-read, well-versed, good, cool presentation for a YouTube personality. So like, again, from a completely non-needing to figure out the truth vantage point, Elena Denon like doesn't bother me at all. But the stuff that like channels like hers and other channels do is a little bit of this salvationism or this doomsdayer or this, yeah, salvationism or doomsdaying or doomsayers, right? A bit like suspicious observers. Like Ben is really smart, super motivated, like a cool guy, right? Clearly brilliant, right? And was way ahead of the curve on Electric Universe, Ben at Suspicious Observers. But like his videos are pretty much doomsayer videos. They're just like, just you see, really soon, Earth's gonna end, and you better be ready, you know? It's like one step away from salvationism. But that's not true, like, not salvationism, but like religious rapture, right? Like this idea that I'll see you at the end of time, and then I'm gonna say I told you so. And I'm like, man, that just, like, no good company, no good band, no good dinner, no good hang, like, ever worked with that type of vibe where, like, somebody was like, just you see, at the end of the night, all y'all are going to be throwing up. Everyone's like, shut up. Like, who cares? Of course we're going to be throwing up, but, like, don't spoil it, right? And so it's weird because, like, I really respect Ben as Suspicious, but I also, like, I can't watch any of his videos anymore because it's like, sun's gonna come and like destroy us, and I'm like, I know it's gonna happen, but like, I'm not gonna sit and wait for it to happen. And believe me, like, if Earth gets nuked, who wants to live past that? Like, I don't know. Anyway, but you know what I'm saying. So, thank you, Annette. I appreciate that. Yeah, so a little bit of doomsayer stuff, and then Elena does this other thing where it's salvationism, and David Wilcock was doing it, Stephen Greer was doing it, Gaia TV in a way was kind of doing it, and like the reason I like Electric Universe or Thunderbolts more because they don't really do salvationism, and it's a really good sign of science about Thunderbolts Project. They might not have everything correct, but the way they present videos is like, hey, it feels very agnostic. It feels religious in some ways, but it also feels very agnostic or decision agnostic. I don't know. I've changed my opinion lately. I told you about Thunderbolts Project because I notice some of the holes in the plot right now, like planetary formation, you know, us creating the human body. They're almost like Michael Claridge talks about some of these videos like playing with thinking, but he doesn't make the obvious step to just link up all the ideas from all the thinkers from the EU conferences. You know, it's so obvious to me. Just take a little clip from Rupert, a little clip from Eileen, a little clip from Gerald Pollack, and that's it pretty much. And then have Stuart Talbot narrate that and link the three ideas together about the human biofield, human consciousness. And then Michael Claridge can make a video about that. Of course, you could bring in Nassim Haramein. You could bring in, like, who's the other cat? Michael Levin. You could bring in Dean Radin. You could bring in John Hagelin. There are people who, like, it's kind of interesting to see, like, we end up with the same kind of cycles of people looking into things that I feel like are still kind of too specialized. Like even Alexander Unziker is like, I just want to figure out variable speed of light. And I'm like, but it's a lot more than that, you know? That's maybe too simplistic. I don't want to dive into it right now, but I think the whole idea about redshift, again, I was studying some redshift recently, like this idea that we presume that not only is the universe expanding, but that somehow a shift in a refractive index or a color index plot line is indicative of motion versus like the idea of redshift being a measure of age. So things changing color over time because of decay versus the fact that something moving away from you is going to look red versus something moving towards you is going to look blue. I know people tell me I'm stupid, but I've looked into this a million times, and it just seems the assumption itself just doesn't make more sense than assuming that over time, as things from instantiation to death decay and therefore emit different spectrums of light. That to me seems way more logical than the fact that no, this thing that has nothing to do with age. Things moving away from us look red-ish, and some don't, some do. And I was like, wait, this whole logic behind redshift doesn't really make sense. So that being said, however, people idolize Halton ARP, and I think Halton ARP is pretty amazing, but I don't think it's the whole picture. It's just this idea that science itself assumes things that are kind of illogical to begin with. So if you took that further, you could say that maybe public science assumes things that are illogical to begin with to end up in the most confusing place possible. And then privatized science assumes logical things based on stuff they've stolen from all the museums and libraries throughout all the years and all the writings from all the great scientists, and it's very logical that we live in this plasma field idea. Copper Trops, what's going on, old friend? Nice to see you. Gone down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but yeah, let me get back to Elena Danaan here, just about the salvationism. So salvationism versus the sun is going to hit an X-class solar flare and kill everybody, and I'll be there to tell you I told you so. Like, what do you assume that's going to happen? Like, people are like waiting to be rescued or basically half dead, and you're going to be like, well, I know that YouTube channel, they were right. They were right about the end of the world. They timed it perfectly. You know what I mean? Like, what are you going to get out of that? And they could argue that, like, no, I'm just trying to tell people to be safe because they can tell if a solar class flare is going to... Well, you can live in that state of constantly waiting for the world to kill you, or you can just live. And for me, that's the type of thing that's the line between stuff that I can listen to on science-related stuff. So when science-related topics or YouTubers who talk about science or natural philosophy. So that's why Thunderbolts Project, most of their videos has this nice agnostic feel to it where you're like, okay, here's a broad horizon of ideas, things that I can kind of put together, I can derive from. They're not really beating me over the head with it. But then recently I've noticed some of these videos, like this idea of completely doing away with the Big Bang without considering, you know, how to augment the idea of the Big Bang, or how to augment the idea of dark matter and dark energy. And I'm not alone, because I noticed a comment or two which said exactly what I said. I'm thinking. I didn't leave the comment, but this other person said, yeah, this Big Bang thing, I hear you, but don't do away with dark matter and dark energy, because there are ways to explain it in the electric universe theory. So somebody, it's not just me thinking these things. All right, let me see what's going on with the moon. I think it's still pretty clouded. Pretty clouded, but I'm going to run this video back here and play a song for a moment, and also get a drink, because you know, I'm parched. One of the best words ever. Parched, my dear. definitely clouded out. 8:30 p.m. I think I'll stick around just a little bit longer. We'll see if it clears up, but might be it for tonight. I'm glad I got on, hang out with y'all for a little bit. Cyber Sully says, being spoke into existence is a big bang in its own right. There you go. I think every idea, right? Every little blip, every little thought, every little existence, bubble, plasmoid, Z-pinch, we could consider that a big bang or a bang. And I think why not? Why not try and integrate something that people are so... See, I think a big part of it is the fact that contemporary science is mean. And it doesn't have to be mean. It doesn't have to be disrespectful, because there are teams that can work together and be respectful. And there are bands that can work together and write music for years at a time and improve one another. Organized systems don't inherently have to be underutilized or unproductive or just prone to disaster. And so I feel it's really important to be able to uplift and to believe and to have faith in small organizations that are actually groups of people that do work together. Like, why shouldn't Thunderbolts Project they've brought so many people under one umbrella. So even what I'm saying is not almost fully true. But then there are certain things that if they just did it a little bit more, it would be so much, there'd be exponential connecting the dots and growth with the channel. But now they've slowed down, and it's kind of it's balancing it out in not maybe a great way, but at the same time, like Gareth from See the Pattern put out a great video today about Redshift. And so there's a lot more information out there, and it's kind of up to people to do. Now they're connecting the dots. Esoteric Gold, what's happening? Should we be wearing garlic tomorrow night? I'm a little bit concerned. Probably not, unless you like garlic. I would probably say okay, because I love garlic, but not for any lunar reasons. Let's see. So what I was talking about earlier, a little bit about Elena Danaan and salvationism, is really just this idea that an alien race or some cedar race, S-E-E-D-E-R, but every time somebody says cedar, I think of the cedars, the trees. But the cedar races or the aliens from either Alpha Centauri or Arcturus or the Blues or the Pleiadians, wherever they're from and however they got here via the Orion Bridge or the wormholes, or did they seed the human race and now are coming back? I just think that it's always on the table. Like that always could be a possibility. But this idea that I'm not going to sit and wait for the end to come. I'm also not going to sit and wait for some alien race to come and change our government. You know what I mean? Or to give equal rights or fair pay. It doesn't seem like the system itself can even be that way, right? Things cannot be pure, because nothing on Earth is pure. Everything has impurity. The impurity is the salt, is the character of things. So it really, just conceptually, we cannot be saved, because then we wouldn't really exist naturally. Exactly, the cedar tree, like the flag of Lebanon. You got it. But people have always said cedar races, and it's always been like that for me. I'm like, the cedar race, the cedar races, you mean like seeding. But still, I think, the root of that, pun unintended, probably the same sort of thing. Werewolves and full moons enhanced by a red moon. Yeah, it's very possible, but it's also it's very early in the morning. So if this eclipse were happening in a few hours, I might say garlic and some concern. Estrella said, who said anything about saving when it comes to ETs? So yeah, I guess it's not just saving, right? But think about it like this. Like, disclosure is about the public understanding this hidden technology and that aliens have contacted Earth, and more. And at some point, revelation will happen where some person on TV will say, no, this is exactly what happened with aliens. I think we're so far past that point that people pretty much wouldn't believe anything at this point, like especially with AI right around the corner. I think we're starting to get to an age where we could be told the truth about extraterrestrials and people would completely not believe it. But I also think that it would never happen. I think the idea that people can perpetually thinking that there's a discussion about whether ETs are real or not is better for marketing than it is to ever reveal whether people know about ETs or not. So the disclosure will never come. But disclosure always felt to me as if it was salvationism. It could also be catastrophism, but salvationism more so because it's one of these things where at some point they'll tell us about this tech and they'll tell us about ETs and then something. But they never said what that something is. They just lead up to, I mean, people tend to think, or at least in the circles that I was running in, you know, opinions would vary from like, they'll come pick us up on their ships and they'll take us to another galaxy. Or they'll come down and make everything more fair and get rid of poverty or evil. And, you know, anything in between, like the technology. So for me, like, it's so broad, it's really difficult to actually talk about the whole either ufology stuff or disclosure and not talk about every different aspect of it, because that's how it's sold to people, right? It's this kind of like milestone thing that if we ever made contact, would people really even know? So you have that aspect of it. Then you have the NASA side of it and the kind of mainstream science side of it, which says, no, you don't understand. It's not going to be in the form of like a person alien. It's going to be in the form of like a radio signal. And if you really pressed hard against like intellectual communities, that's what they would really end up saying. No one really thinks it's people's. I don't want to say that. That's not true. A lot of people think it's like gray aliens who look like people, but I think intellectual-wise, people think it could be signals from space or whatnot. I guess where I land on this without talking about all different topics in ufology would be the fact that if you're spending time on one thing, then you don't have enough time to spend on this other thing. It's kind of dumb, but it really is that. If you're spending time waiting for Stephen Greer or David Wilcock to tell you about their experiences with going to Mars, then that's what you're doing. And you're not studying this other thing, or you're not writing a song or so on. And I think I got to there based on a type of feeling that I was like, well, if I'm watching this stuff and I keep thinking, then that's where my time and my mental energy is invested. And so I started to imagine, well, what if I decided that, so what if there were aliens or not aliens? I wasn't going to look at it from that vantage point. And that's when it really clicked with me that the moon alone, without anything else, no aliens, is already more impressive in a real world, let's say materialistic sense. But even in a metaphysical and philosophical sense, having a moon that exists that we can look at is far more profound than speculating on alien existence or salvationism or even solar catastrophism. And I think I tried to articulate this years ago on the Electric View about how I don't disagree that there are aliens or there could be aliens. And I also don't disagree that Earth could end in a cataclysm. But I'm not going to spend my emotional and mental field energy on these topics at all, because I just there's so much more to discover and to pay attention to be at tension with. Anyway, that's some ideas here. Good to see you, though, Esoteric Gold. What else is going on, my friends? Should we play another song here? I feel like I didn't even finish what I was saying about Elena Danaan. Anyway, so Elena Danaan and Dan Winter together on a video is almost intolerable. And I hate saying that because they're both like really cool people, but there's something about it where they're both kind of affirming their biases and their ideas, and in this way that leaves no room for any type of, I don't know, that's not true actually though, because I feel like sometimes I sense that Dan Winters, like, I trust her a lot, but I'm still skeptical. But I don't know, because he says the opposite. He says that he's like completely bought into this stuff. Anyway, should I keep going about this topic? Because this topic like has so many different facets, and I'm not sure people are interested in it, but let me know. Marky Rizzo says, I remember watching everything about MK Ultra only to theorize that we are the victims of victims of it. That makes me think of something which I hope kind of like touches upon that. Victims of it, okay. But it's like, imagine MK Ultra were called something stupider, like the Harrison effect. We're victims of the Harrison effect. I don't know. I guess you can make anything sound fancy. I just feel like MK Ultra sounds fancy, and therefore it's not as, again, you know what I mean? It's like this idea, like the pale blue dot. Carl Sagan, gosh, it's so fancy, but it doesn't really tell you anything about Earth. You know, it doesn't tell you. And so MK Ultra, like, while I agree that people are propagandized to, I think to some degree people, if they studied things, they could figure it out. I think maybe the natural effect of reality, like I'm saying, is that 95% of people will effectively create their own obstacles to learning. But it doesn't mean that, and I don't know, it does mean that some will never learn, right? The power of suggestion. Actually, gosh, there's so many things that are popping up tonight, but I was watching even Dean Radin, I was talking about, where people are talking about consciously affecting the universe via meditation or prayer, right? The reason people can't do this is because imagine if every creature, see, you couldn't impart telekinesis or flight to a single human. You would have to distribute it along a plot. So a whole bunch of people would get flying powers, telekinesis, manifesting objects out of thin air. And the human race would be, like Earth would be dead the next day. So in order for equilibrium in nature to exist, means that creatures like humans get to see at a certain spectrum range, and we get to feel at a certain spectrum range, and we get to sense things in our field at a certain spectrum range that is, I would say, perfect for us to exist. We arise from the perfection of the fractal versus the other way around. So I hear people talk constantly about the limitations of humans. Humans are so limited with our limited brains and our limited eyesight and our limited sense of the color spectrum. And I'm like, this makes no sense to me. And it never did, but now I can articulate why. Because the implication that somehow we arise from something faulty makes less sense than the opposite. By virtue of arising from consciousness, you can say that, you know, we are faulty to a degree, but necessitatively. So we have a simplistic range of colors that we can see because that is how we arose. We arose from the perfection of, at some point, for us to have the optimal experience to live in equilibrium with the rest of the world, humans weren't granted telekinesis. But that's not to say that that's, so I guess that's a little black and white. If I take it one step further, the way I really think about it is that everyone was provided a little bit of telekinesis, tiny orders of telekinesis, not enough to move a little paperclip on the table. But if you had 100,000 people together deciding to move a paperclip, maybe, right? Maybe you get a collective field effect that can interact with magnetism like that. And I say that because think about it. The entire system wouldn't exist if things were granted superhuman powers, quote unquote. So if you could, like, again, you couldn't give it to just one person and say this one person is immortal As soon as you grant immortality or you grant superhuman powers, you have to distribute it. And if you distributed flying to all creatures, like dogs could fly and people could create matter, I think the system would destroy itself so quickly that life wouldn't sustain. And life is a sustain of vibration, and therefore life, I think, arises from the perfection of the oscillation, not arises with faults, arises from faults. I think that might have been something. But you know what I mean. So people talk about this, so like Dean Radin was saying, well, if people practice, then we could move things with our minds. And I'm like, but we don't want that. We do want that somehow, but like we don't really want people to be able to move things with their minds because it's too sensitive a power. So humans are limited on purpose because we limited ourselves enough to have the most broad possible experience. So limitations are something to be grateful for, I guess, is what I want to say. And it's always presented in the opposite light. It actually really bugs me, because pretty much across the board, even with people who understand fundamental consciousness, tend to constantly paint humanity and creatures, well, creatures and clouds less so, but people for sure, about how like we're at fault to begin with, the original sin. But I'm like, the original sin is the necessitative abstract contrast of our existence. Like why is it painted in this kind of strange light? Let's see what else I got. What else we got in the chat here? So yeah, I'm getting hungry. Almost 9 o'clock, 10 to 9. So yeah, I hope everybody I wish everybody a blessed, massive, crazy lunar eclipse tonight, this morning, coming up in about, 9 hours or so. I'm going to probably try and watch a stream of somebody else doing it and enjoy some dreams while I'm at it. But I'll maybe catch you all tomorrow or the day after. I know tomorrow's supposed to be the full moon, but this actually, in a way, is more full than what we'll see tomorrow around the same time. Like, we're about 99.4, 0.5, closing in on full here. So I appreciate you all very much. If you're catching this tomorrow, hope you're having a great day. And like I mentioned at the top of this, I'm not trying, I am archiving this whole channel, about 80 videos away from it. Turns out I can pretty much figure out the right number, so there are about 130 uploaded videos, and there are about 673 or so streams that were still up. So that's roughly the number of videos that have been on this channel. Right now it says 701, or today this will be 702. But yeah, anyway, I'm creating a content archive. I'm going to double back it up, and I'm going to feel really good about that. But if people want to leave me comments in old videos, if you happen to want to do some deep digging and find your favorite chat room song or favorite topic that I've discussed, maybe there's a sound bite. It'll be a cool community effort. There's no rush, but leave me a comment. I'll try and log it. I'll Kenny Loggins it, and maybe make a compilation with those favorite best of clips. I think that would be fun. Okie doke. So light of the moon to take us out, and yeah, interesting times we live in. All right, my friends, this is your captain signing off. Edge of space, edge of reality. It's been a fun one. Happy full moon, happy eclipse. Wish you all a good night.
Wander through the streets, far away from a sinking body. Dragged into this place, back from time and space. I was in line for another party. Till mama little came along and asked me where the hell I thought I was going. long with you, I've been singing about the stream. So long for you, till I see the color of your eyes reflected in the same picture I made for you. Oh Lord, then you know what brings it, and you know what soul can sing to, but you know what brings it. So we got it all, so what brings it up? And you know what soul can got us electric love, what brings it up? And you know what picture, and you know what soul can sounds electric love. Stability is rocking and stability, sipping a some peace and love. Don't hinge on nothing above.